In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a face mask out of cloth without the use of a sewing machine or sewing of any kind. Now there's a lot of tutorial videos out there that show you how to make a face mask using a sewing machine or using sewing of some kind. So it's great for those folks who are really not comfortable sewing stuff. And just a disclaimer, this is not a surgical mask. It's not an N95 respirator either. And I really don't recommend that medical professionals or healthcare providers use this mask unless you have no other option available to you. This is really meant to be a mask used by the general public. In terms of material, you'll need some 1/4-inch elastic, and if you aren't able to find anything as thin as a 1/4 inch, you can use larger or wider pieces of elastic. This will work, it's just a little less comfortable around the ears. So the 1/4-inch size is what I recommend, and you'll need some fabric. You'll need enough fabric to cut out 2 5x8 or 5-inch by 8-inch pieces of cloth. Now in terms of material, today I'm going to be using a piece of cotton. This is a high thread count cotton that I had lying around from another project. However, if you don't have any piece of cloth lying around, you can always use something like a bed sheet or pillowcase that you can sacrifice. Preferably something with a high thread count would work well. You can also use denim jeans and muslin if you prefer. However, I don't recommend using t-shirt material at all. It doesn't do a very good job as a barrier for fluids, but if you absolutely have no other fabric in your house, you can definitely use a t-shirt, but I don't recommend it. And if you're looking to order some fabric, I'll leave some links below. So in terms of tools, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a household iron. Any household iron will work just fine. A ruler or scale, which you can both use to measure and as a flat edge to draw lines. Now if you don't have a ruler or scale, you can use a measuring tape and the edge of a book or some other flat edge to draw these lines, to mark and cut the fabric. You're also going to need a pencil to mark lines and mark points on your fabric. And very importantly, you're going to need a hot glue gun. Now this is a precision hot glue gun. It's very inexpensive, but works really well. And if you don't have one of these, I'll leave a link right below the video. However, you can use almost any high temperature hot glue gun. Just make sure it's a high temperature hot glue gun. And as I said, I'll leave a few links below in case you're looking to buy one on Amazon. And last but not least, you'll need a hot glue stick. Now the hot glue stick is a regular high temperature hot glue stick that you'd find in a craft or hobby store or online. Nothing fancy. You don't need a fabric glue stick. Before you get started, you want to clean and sanitize the surface you're going to build your mask on. I recommend cleaning and sanitizing the surface to ensure nothing from the table gets onto the mask when it's being made. To do this, I recommend using a paper towel wetted with either isopropyl alcohol. This is alcohol that you can buy at a regular chemist or pharmacy, or a all-purpose cleaner. This is an all-purpose disinfectant cleaner, or you can use disinfectant wipes if you can get your hands on these. Make sure you clean your table surface and any of the tools that you're using. It's one additional step, but it really prevents your mask from getting contaminated when you build it. So the first step in the process is to mark and cut out 2 rectangles from this fabric, and these rectangles should be 5 inches by 8 inches in size, and you want to cut 2 of these out. Now you can always use 3 layers, but for this example I'm only going to use 2. You're welcome to use a 3rd layer if you want that extra layer of protection, but for most people 2 layers should work just fine. So I've marked out 2 5x8 rectangles on my fabric. Now they don't have to be absolutely perfect, but do the best you can. And what I'm going to do now is cut these rectangles out using my scissors. So there you go. I have 2 5x8 rectangles of fabric cut out. Now an important thing to note is that you want to make sure that both pieces of fabric are cut to about exactly the same size. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but get it as close to the same size as possible. And don't worry too much about neatening the edges up. We can trim that when we're done. Let's now work on the elastic. I've also cut out 2 7-inch long pieces of the 1/4-inch elastic, which we're going to use for the ear loops. Now the first thing you want to do before you get started is make sure your iron is plugged in and is warming up. You also want to make sure that your hot glue gun is plugged in and that it's turned on and it's also warming up. You also want to make sure that there's a glue stick in the glue gun before you start warming it up. So a couple of safety tips when using a glue gun. Good quality glue guns should have a on-off button, and you should have a power light on the back like this one does. Most good glue guns will have those safety features in them. And once it's plugged in and powered on, as you can see here, the tip becomes really hot, so you want to pay attention to that. You don't want to touch it accidentally and burn yourself. So for safety's sake, you want to put it on a surface that won't burn. You don't want to put it next to paper or cloth and have that burn on you. So put that off to the side and make sure it doesn't touch you as you're working. So if you haven't used a glue gun before, once the glue gun gets to its optimal temperature, which usually takes about 2 to 5 minutes depending on the glue gun, when it gets to that temperature, you can actually press on the trigger, and when you press on the trigger, you'll actually see glue coming out. Now, it's also important to remember that the glue coming out of the gun at that point is also very hot and can burn you, so you want to be careful about that. And if it does fall on a surface, it's likely to harden and stick to that surface, so make sure to lay down a cutting mat or some cardboard on the surface before you start, so you don't ruin your table or work surface. I highly recommend a cutting mat over cardboard. So folks, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tack on our ear loops made out of elastic to one piece of the 2 pieces of fabric. You want to tack these pieces of elastic to the inside of the piece of cloth that you'd like to use for the outside surface. But before you tack these pieces on, so you want to mark a point 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric in each of these corners here. So you want to do that in that corner and then mark another 1/2 inch on the inside again. And this will give you the tacking position for your ear loops. So once you have that position generally marked, it doesn't have to be super precise. So 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric, that is 1/2 inch from the long edge of the fabric in each corner. And then grab your hot glue gun and lay a tiny amount of hot glue on one corner and then press down with your elastic. So you want to press that elastic down in that corner till it's firmly in place. And you want to make sure it's flat against the fabric. The orientation doesn't matter too much, just make sure that it's flat. And then you want to form a loop by doing the same thing on the other side as well. Drop a small bead of hot glue on the surface, then grab your elastic band and press it down firmly till it sticks. And I'm going to repeat that process for the other ear loop as well. So I'm going to drop a bead of glue right by that mark that I just made earlier, and then press your piece of elastic down onto that bead of glue till it sticks down. Doesn't have to be perfect. Let's do the other side. Lay a small bead of glue and then grab your elastic and press down firmly till it sticks to the surface. So there you go. I've attached both my ear loops to the outer piece of fabric. Is this hot glue strong enough to hold this elastic in place? And that's where the iron comes in. So I'll show you a technique that'll make this bond a whole lot stronger in a few seconds. Now you want to make sure your iron is on the hottest setting possible. On my iron, that is setting number 3 for cotton or linen. That's the hottest setting possible. You want to make sure it's on that setting. And then grab your iron and put the end or the tip of that iron gently on top of that piece of elastic where you just tacked it. And you want to make sure it sort of remelts that hot glue. Nice and gentle. You don't want too much force. And then lift. And what this does is it ensures that the glue flows into the pores of the fabric and solidifies that bond. So it's much better than just pushing it down with your hands when the glue is hot. So this ensures that the bond is much stronger. And we're going to do that for all 4 sides. Let's do that again. Grab your iron and gently, just on the spot where you tacked it, you just want to place the iron down gently and remelt that glue till it sort of flows into the fabric. Don't do it for too long, just enough for the glue to melt and for that bond to get a little stronger. And you want to wait for that to cool down so it doesn't pop off. And next, what you want to do is place your inner fabric on top of the assembly that you've just created, which is the elastic tacked onto the outer piece. Just lay that gently down and make sure all the edges line up properly. And next, we're going to work edge by edge. We're not going to do all the edges at the same time. We're not going to glue all the edges at the same time. What we're going to do is glue one edge and then work our way around the entire mask. Even if you're using 3 layers instead of 2, the procedure is pretty much the same. You want to glue it layer by layer. So I'm going to work on this edge first. What I'm going to do is fold the edge up a little bit and then very quickly lay a very thin bead. And that's why you need a precision glue gun like this one. You can obviously use another glue gun. Just lay a very thin bead of glue all the way down, and then fold your edge back and press down gently till it seals. This isn't really enough to maintain a really good bond. So what we're going to do is again use the technique with our hot iron. So I'm going to bring that hot iron onto the edge very gently, and what I'm going to do is press and make sure it melts in place, and then do that on the entire edge. So make sure the glue on the edge melts and has flattened out and melted down till the glue sets into place. Again, do that very gently, nice even strokes to ensure that you're flattening out that adhesive and it's flowing into the fabric. And you want to allow each edge to cool for a bit before you work on the next edge. And something I discovered was that as you iron this edge down, you want to make sure that you don't leave it on the surface for too long. It may actually adhere to the surface beneath it. So as soon as it cools down a little bit, you want to make sure you pull it off that surface and let it cool off. And let's repeat the same process for the opposite edge. We're going to lay down a very thin bead of glue all along the edge, nice and neat, all the way down the edge, and then fold that fabric over. Just press it down gently till it makes contact. Let's grab our hot iron and make sure it seals down. So press down till it seals and then work your way up the edge. Be really careful about the points at which the elastic has fused with the fabric. You want to go over it one more time, but be nice and gentle to make sure the elastic doesn't come off when you're doing this. So there you go. I've sealed off the opposite edge as well. And again, you want to peel it off gently before it completely cools off to prevent it from sticking to the surface beneath it. And then let's wait for that to cool off. And let's now repeat the same procedure for the edges with the ear loops. So I'm going to pull that edge up very gently. Don't pull it up too much. Just enough space to lay a bead of glue. And what I'm going to do is lay that bead of glue all the way up that edge. Don't put too much. Just a thin bead of glue. Let's now grab our hot iron, and I'm going to go at it from the inside so I don't accidentally burn the elastic. And I'm just going to gently seal the edge of that fabric down. Don't need to put too much force. It's just the heat of the iron that's doing most of the work. And I also want to go over the spot where the elastic was fused. So again, I'm just going to go over that spot as well in both corners. And I'm going to gently seal that edge off. Make sure it's as flat as you can get it. That's what you want. You don't want your mask to be too thick on the edges, and you want to make sure that the glue has flowed enough to permanently seal that mask off. And we're going to do the same for the opposite edge. So there you go. I've completed sealing the entire mask, and you want to make sure that this cools down before you move on to the next step. And in the next step, we'll be putting in the pleats that'll be essential to giving the mask its shape. Now, to put pleats into your mask, you want to flip it such that the outside face is on the bottom, and what you're working with is the inside face of your mask. And then you want to go ahead and measure about 1.5 inches from the edge or the long edge of the fabric, and you want to measure inwards. So you want to measure about 1.5 inches and mark off a spot using your pencil. And you want to do that on the other side as well. I recommend about 1.5 inches from the edge of the fabric, and mark that. And you want to repeat that same procedure on the other edge as well. You want to lay it down and mark 1.5 inches from the edge, and do that on both sides. Let's mark 1.5 inches inwards. And these are going to be the positions of our 2 pleats. You can always do 3 pleats if you'd like, but 2 works just fine. And once you have that marked out, it's time to fold our pleats. Now, an important thing to note is that all your pleats should be in the same direction to ensure your mask has the correct shape. And what you're going to do is grab your fabric and fold your pleats. So you're going to fold inwards and then fold about 1/4 inch. So you want to fold down 1/4 inch past the mark that you just marked out. So fold down 1/4 inch and then fold it along the fabric, and do the same on the other side as well. And let's lay that pleat down as well as we possibly can. Again, as I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, so make sure it's just folded down and folded in about 1/4 inch. So you're going to see about 1/4 inch of a fold on that pleat right here. So I folded my pleat down with my hands as best as possible, and once that's done, I'm going to run my iron over it just to make sure that that pleat holds in place. So let's do that. My iron is still on its hottest setting, and I want to gently go over that pleat, make sure it sort of lines up properly. So I'm going to run my hot iron over it just to make sure that the pleat line has been marked correctly. So there you go. I've used my iron and marked that pleat off, so I can leave that in place for now. Let's move on to the next one. Again, folks, similar procedure. You want to look at the mark that you just made and fold in about 1/4 of an inch, nice and gentle. And you want to make sure it's in the same exact direction as your first pleat. Make sure you have your pleat lined up and do it on the other side as well. All right, so there you go. I folded down my second pleat by hand, and I'm going to press it down as best as I possibly can with my hand, iron over it to make sure it sits in place. And again, it should be roughly about 1/4 of an inch. So there you go. I've set both my pleats in place, as you can see here. These are my 2 pleats, and a few things to note. They should be in the same direction. You don't want your pleats going in opposite directions. It's best that they face in the same direction. And one way to check pleats have come out correctly is to make sure that the shape of the mask is generally rectangular even after the pleats have been folded. So that's one way of just making sure that your pleats have come out the way you want them to. Next, it's time to seal our pleats down. So let's grab a hot glue gun, and what we're going to do is lay a very small bead of glue right there, and then press your pleat down till it sticks in place. Now remember, you're only putting glue in the corners of the pleats. You're not putting glue throughout the pleat. It's just on those corners. And let's do the same for all the corners of both pleats. So I'm going to lay a little bit of hot glue and glue it down. Hold it down for a second. Let's flip it around and do the same on the other side. Lay down a little bit of glue and let's glue the thing down. And we're going to do the same on the last corner. And now it's time to seal and solidify the bonds on those pleats. So I'm going to bring my hot iron and lay it gently on top of each pleat for a second or two till that glue melts and flows and it flattens that pleat. Again, do the same thing on the other side. Place my iron on that corner, just on that corner where there's glue, and flatten it out. Again, do the same thing on the other side, and you want to press it down till the glue flows and the pleat kind of flattens, or the corner of the pleat flattens. Now that does complete the construction of the mask itself. It's ready to wear. However, you'll notice that there are threads sticking out the side, and you can use a scissor to kind of trim those and neaten your mask up before you wear it. So go ahead, don't cut your fabric, just gently trim those threads off to neaten your mask up. There you go, folks. Your homemade mask is now ready to use. So when you actually iron on the hot glue, there's a tendency for some of the hot glue, just very little of that hot glue, to transfer from the fabric onto the surface of your iron. And you really don't want that to dry in place and then transfer onto other clothing. Keep the iron nice and hot, and then grab an old towel or a rag or a microfiber towel, anything you can find. Lay that flat on a flat surface, and then you want to iron onto it, but you want to iron onto it in straight strokes. Don't iron on the same surface again. So if you have a very small piece of cloth, just iron one side straight down and then flip it over and iron it again. And this ensures that all the sticky hot glue then transfers onto that cloth and leaves the surface of your iron clean. And folks, these masks are washable. However, I don't recommend machine washing these. Machine washing them might loosen these bonds up. So I recommend hand washing them in a bucket in cold water with some detergent or disinfectant. So I just washed it for the first time with a little bit of laundry detergent. I hand washed it and hung it out to dry. And you can see that even after the first wash, the whole mask holds together and it's extremely durable. And if you're able to make this mask at home, please let me know how it worked out for you in the comments below. I hope this is helpful for folks who are really averse to sewing stuff, either by hand or using a sewing machine. And if it was helpful, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more reviews, how-to videos, and unboxings. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.